Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me today typically would be Michael Becker, but Michael Becker is on the road and looking at another transaction. So good luck to Michael Becker on that one. Sitting in the podcast today is going to be Ricardo Hinojosa with Old Capital. Hey, Ricardo.
How's it going, Paul?
It's going great. This is going to be an exciting podcast, I think. As Michael Becker and I say, the first transaction is the hardest. The second and the third become substantially less stressful and much easier because you've created a team template for successfully closing an apartment transaction. You've put together your team. You have a banker, an attorney, a broker, an insurance professional, third-party property management company, and probably a physical inspector or an engineer. So just like the general manager of a baseball team, you cannot play without players. So you cannot close without a support group. For this podcast and the next podcast, we'll focus on investors buying their first apartment building, doing their first transaction. We want to know why they decided to purchase apartments. Why not single family homes or something else like a franchise, or why not even stocks, bonds, or cash? And so we want to find out why they did it, what roadblocks that they had to overcome, and why apartments. Again, the first one of the transaction is definitely the most difficult. So today in the podcast, we have Gary and Heidi Young. So Gary and Heidi Young, they purchased the property in Irving, Texas. And I kind of want to introduce them to everyone in the podcast. And I'm going to kick it over to Ricardo. So Gary, Heidi, how are you guys?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Doing great. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for coming in. Ricardo, let's kick it off.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. So let's start off by taking a little bit of a step back. And we'd like to get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about your background, professional life, where you're from, things like that, and we'll go from there.
Great. Well, Heidi and I, we were married a while back. We're both from California. We got married just before I finished medical school, and Heidi got her MBA at the same time. We were living in Southern California and trained in internal medicine first, and then decided I didn't like that and did another 4 years of training in radiation oncology. Finally got a real job, and we moved to the northern part of California, where we were for quite a while before moving to Texas.
Excellent. And so, as I understand it, you were in California. You started off investing in single family in California, correct? Tell us a little bit about that piece of it and how you got started in that.
We started with my parents needing a place to stay, so we bought them a condo. We wound up buying a vacation home, and so we had 3 homes. But when we got to Texas, we had 2 kids at Baylor, and that can be kind of pricey. And so we wound up looking at real estate there. I found that you could actually buy a single-family home, rent it out to Baylor students, get 10% or more cash on cash, and professionally managed. So it was no stress. They did everything, and I thought it was a good deal. The only problem is we actually bought 3 homes in 1 year in 2015, but it's not enough.
Yeah, it's tough to scale single families, and so if you have multifamilies, you can do a good job scaling to buy and buy and buy. So Gary, you're a doctor.
Yes.
So if you remember back probably about 2 months ago, we had Tom Black on. So he wrote the Passive Income Physician book. So I think it's a great book on the observation that some highly compensated doctors have limited net worth. So a solution that Tom, I think, pointed out was to create a passive income stream from investing in real estate. Because he's an ER physician and an apartment investor, and he tells a great story about the state of healthcare and the single payer, the overregulation, and being kind of an independent contractor, and the unbelievable stress with burnout probably by the time you're 50. So if you don't have other income sources, you may have problems. And so it's a great read. Get the book on Amazon, The Passive Income Physician. Tell me, do you think you're suffering or could you suffer from burnout being a doctor? Is that one of the things that goes on?
Absolutely. I actually enjoyed that podcast. I did get his book on Amazon and looked it over. I haven't finished it. But as far as burnout, I think he said 70% in his field. I would say everyone in medicine goes through burnout, and it's all of varying degrees. My particular area with oncology, sometimes it can be difficult. Other times it's just very rewarding. So one of the things he said back then was it would be nice to control the amount of time you have, not just do everything, spend your whole life in medicine. And that would be a real blessing to have the option of doing other things so your income is not dependent on what you're doing in medicine.
Yeah, and I think you also mentioned too is that a lot of the guys on the ER side have become independent contractors to the hospital, so they can't really write off a lot of stuff. I think they write off their stethoscope, but can't write off a lot of things. But if you find yourself that you work a couple hours a week and then you do a majority of your time doing real estate, you're able to use being a real estate professional as a tax deduction on there, and then you can write off a bunch of stuff that flows through. So let's talk about that journey into multifamily. I'm going to throw this back to Ricardo.
Yeah, so you're back in California. You've started investing in single family. So what brought you to Texas? Let's talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into the whole multifamily piece.
Yeah, with this burnout issue, I think that's a real big deal. Yeah. And I was kind of feeling that. We took 6 months as a family, and we joined this group called Youth with a Mission, and had an amazing time both in Hawaii and Thailand and China. And I realized that after spending all this time doing all this preparation for medicine, that there's more to life than medicine. And so when we came back, we had this opportunity to build out a cancer center. It was a multi-million-dollar facility. We were debt-free in 3 years, and I was ready to retire in 2008. The hospital decided they needed more of a cash cow and wanted to take over our facility. So we retired without an income at that point. And we thought we had an opportunity in Texas, and that's why we came out here. The opportunity didn't really pan out. The housing market just crashed right after we got here. We had 3 homes in California. We were upside down on those homes. I had no income, and so that was a real trying year.
And that was 2008? Right?
2008.
Wow.
Tough times.
Tough times, not just for people in Texas, but definitely for people in California.
For sure.
No doubt about that.
Yeah. So you get here, and then I think you eventually got your license here in Texas, started practicing again here in Texas. And then how long into that journey did you start looking into real estate again, and specifically multifamily?
Yeah, it's a little scary when you've been hit once. And what I realized was that if we had income-producing property, we would have been fine. In California, you just want the appreciation. That's how you hopefully invest wisely. But we had 2 children in Waco going to Baylor, and you just have to pay for their housing. So we were looking at single-family homes. We found that we could buy a single-family home, rent them out to students, and get at least a 10% cash on cash with professional management all rolled in. And so we started doing that in 2015, bought 3 homes by the end of that year. And it was a good investment, I think. It's just not enough.
Yeah, so the ability to scale that is tough. So what took you to multifamily eventually?
Yeah, I was actually at a conference in medicine and sat next to a guy who told me about a mentoring group. And we were in California, but this guy was from Texas, and he told us about a mentoring group in Texas, and it's just kind of a providential thing. So we got into this mentoring group, heard about single family and then multifamily. And when we heard about multifamily, we looked at each other and we immediately just joined. We were like the first people there to sign up. We went through the education within a month, and we wanted to jump into something. So by 2 months, we already had a letter of intent accepted.
Wow.
60 days after that, we closed. And so by September of last year, we were in a deal.
Fully immersed in what was going to be a great adventure for the 2 of us.
That's great. I'm a big believer in making sure you invest in education before you invest in real estate, and especially in multifamily, because they can be structurally complicated, a little bit different from, say, single family stuff. Typically you put down 20% or 25% in a single family deal. There's really not a lot of moving parts, but it's hard to scale. You can't, 10, 15, then it becomes difficult to actually go out and manage all these properties in all different locations and try to keep track about what's going on. You're buying yourself kind of a full-time job if you don't do it yourself, type of a deal. So multifamily kind of fit your parameters. Tell me a little bit about some of the education that you learned that from this mentoring group. What did you find of value?
Well, I think the biggest thing was opening our eyes to what multifamily can do.
Right.
It's not just dependent on what the market is around you, but that you can take a property, improve it, and actually get a reward for all your effort. We've always worked hard, and we figure we could at least do as good as someone else. But it was the excitement, I think, of being able to take something and make it better. It's like taking an old car and really rehabbing that car. That's exciting. It's something I actually wanted to do, but it's probably not a great investment. You do that with real estate, and that's something that really pays off. Yeah.
And it's a really fun project for the two of us to be able to work together on it. And the fact that there is some creativity involved is why I really enjoyed being able to do this. It's the two of us working as a team has been a real blessing, because our last child just graduated. So as an empty nest, it's a great project that brings the two of us together and enables us to enjoy the benefits of the gifts that each of us have.
Sure. So let's jump in. How did you find this property?
Realtor.com.
Is that right?
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I was looking every day on Realtor.com. You always hear about all these other sources, but I found that you could find something there, and we just jumped in.
So this is a small property. How many units?
11.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the deal. What'd you like about it? You saw it on Realtor.com, but then what? How did you get more information? What appealed to you? Take us through that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a 62 property. It was definitely a Class C. We told our broker in our group that we were interested, and she took it from there. Got all the financials, did the tour. It really made sense. The numbers made sense, and it was affordable. We jumped in, put the letter of intent. My sister also came on board as she joined the group and wanted her first deal to be part of ours, and so she joined us too.
So this is 11 units, older property, in a good location now.
Yeah.
This is in Irving, Texas, correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what the property needed. As I remember, it was in pretty good shape. The exterior was in pretty good shape, so not a lot of deferred maintenance. It was highly occupied. I believe it was pretty much full when you took it over. So what was the upside for you into the deal?
Well, the upside was to learn.
Yeah.
That's the real reason we did it. But the numbers made sense. The cap rate was right. But it was really the learning that we wanted to do. We wanted to self-manage. We didn't want someone else to manage this. We wanted to learn everything from the ground up.
At least at this point.
Right.
You'll eventually turn over the reins to a third-party property management company with a much larger transaction down the road.
Absolutely.
At 100 or 150 doors.
Yes.
I don't want to have Heidi
No, I don't want to be doing that.
150 doors.
Many doors.
No. But this was a good opportunity. I mean,
Yes.
both of you guys are professionally educated. You guys spend a lot of time in your career fields, but you also wanted to kind of figure out, if I'm going to own something, what's really the downside? How can this thing go bad a little bit? And you weren't going to expose your balance sheet or yourself to a large downside if you bought a smaller property. So you kind of did this as a stepping stone to a much larger property. So just like Ricardo had asked you, and I think you replied back, the property was a stabilized property. It was built in 1962
Yes.
or so. And so when you guys bought the property, we're kind of jumping ahead. How much work in terms of dollars did you put into the property, and where did that go?
Well, even though it was fully occupied, we didn't necessarily have all of those occupants paying, is what we discovered.
Interesting.
Really?
So that was an interesting thing that we got to learn about, is how immediately we got to learn about eviction, and we got to learn about the pauper's appeal, which is not the jalapeno poppers, but
So what does that mean? I mean, you guys came from single family. You had a couple single families down in Waco in California, and now you have a multifamily property, and now you have not just 3 tenants and 3 different properties. You have 11 tenants in 11 doors.
And yeah, so right away, we needed access to as much information from mentors as possible. We were able to get what we could from them and dig in on our own. That's what we've always done. We're learners. We figure it out. And we jumped in and figured out how to do this and how to do it right. Of course, you make mistakes, but with just 11 units, you can make mistakes on the first one.
Right.
And then you go from then, it's just smooth sailing. You know how to do it.
So again, you're self-managing. So Heidi,
I'm there on the ground. Yeah.
you're on the ground.
But that's the way we like to operate, is me being able to see what's actually happening. I notice what's happening within the apartments. Structurally, I can notice something, and I can go to the people that I need to in order to access the professionals for those particular things. But I love doing that part.
So how did you get the paupers out?
It's a learning process of court cases. I actually went and sat through eviction court for the entirety, not just for my case, but to learn to see how is it that the judges assess each case and what are the things that they're looking for. So being able to see what are the essentials that she's looking for or he's looking for.
Right.
And you just have to go through the process and access attorneys if you have to.
Yeah, but you learn a tremendous amount
Oh, so much.
in that when you look at a possible new tenant that wants to live in your building, you view what it was like to sit in pauper's court with those eyes saying, I want to scan their application to make sure they're making enough money, they have good credit, they have good cash in the bank, they have no credit or criminal background problems. So that really was a good learning experience.
It was a great learning experience. And to be able to do it with the understanding that they are people. I wanted to still enable that human element. One of the things that we try to do is go hard on the issue, but soft on the person. So and knowing that they are still people, but yet there are things that they need to do in order to grow as people as well.
Great point.
Tell us a little bit about some interesting challenges you might have uncovered as you took over the property.
Well, Gary had the first one right when we took over.
Yeah, we were warned by our mentor about whether we should do a passive deal or should we jump in, and we were going to do passive first, and that
It just doesn't seem like enough.
it was this. It
For us.
wasn't
Not as exciting,
It
right?
wasn't my passion at all. I was really passionate about this, but the very first day of takeover, I went down to knock on the doors to tell them, "Hey, don't pay the other guy, pay us." And this lady comes out and she says, we don't have hot water. And it's the first day. And so I call up the gas company and they said they would send someone out, check it out. They shut our gas down and they were trying to figure out whether we had a leak or not. And so this was a Tuesday, and by Friday, somehow I managed to get them to turn it back on. And we still didn't have hot water. So we got someone out there, we got a plumber out there. It turns out that the person that we bought it from, his order for shutoff came in after our order to turn on. So our electric got shut off after takeover, or the same day of takeover.
And it took you how long?
It took us 4 days to get
Oh my.
hot water back. But I knew at that point that this was something I really was passionate about, because I said to Heidi, if this is the worst thing that can happen. I love this. No one's going to die from this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's amazing that on the first day, stumbled a little bit, able to recover. And how's your relationship with your tenant base from that period of time on?
They're actually wonderful. Just even the other week, I was down there asking them, so how do you think we've done in the last 6 months? And they love us as their landlords. So it's been real great to just be able to have a relationship. And we offer them grace in certain things, and they offer us grace back. And it's been wonderful. Not too much grace, but just the fact that there is relationship has been a real good thing for us.
That's great. And why do you think Gary has the passion for this business?
It's so cute to watch him. He loves what he does whenever he does this. I have not seen this little boy at Christmas come out too often, but this is something that he loves. And I think it's because he loves the creativity. He loves, like he was saying, it's like turning an old car into a nice, shiny rendition of something that works. And it works well. And you could say, I did this.
Well, maybe I'm going to get philosophical with you. You know, maybe with medicine, there's things that the Almighty controls and does that you as a physician cannot control. In this business, this is something you can have a direct impact and can control. And maybe
Absolutely.
that's one of the things I'm just sitting here talking about it. Maybe that's one of the things that you have passion on is that you can control a person's life for the positive and make a great impact on them and their children and their family about being part of your family, you know, down the road.
That's what it feels like, is that it's a part of us is being infused in whatever it is that we're doing. We're having ideas of how to help this entire project become something better than what it has been.
A little bit like a mission work,
right? Yes. Doing something that will increase the vitality for all that are involved, as well as being able to see something just nice and shiny. I guess that's a Texas thing, huh?
And the property is well located. Even though it's a small building, it's a great stepping stone to a much larger building that I know that you're going to have a passion to get into also, and not just have 11 families that you can affect, but 100, 150 families down the road. But right now, when you manage the property, you manage it at a distance. You don't physically live there or work there, and you don't have anybody that you pay as an assistant to you. It's you. So Heidi, when the call comes in on your cell phone, you're managing the property. Is that how it's working?
Pretty much so, but we do have some eyes that are nearby and on the ground. And that's part of it too, is developing relationships with people around that can be eyes nearby.
So tell us a little bit about that. You've got someone there on the property that helps you.
Actually,
how does that work?
There's a couple of people who manage some storage units nearby.
Okay.
And they have watched this property from its inception. And because they've always seen it as maybe their child that's grown up, they have a vested interest just from the heart. So being able to ask them, hey, what do you see happening here? Or being able to get some information from them as to what was it like before? Who have you seen do a good job in this particular area? So we've been able to access them.
They used to manage it before.
Initially, when it was first birth, they managed it. So being able to have that has been a great asset for us.
Interesting. Tell us a little bit about, so you've owned it for 6 months. Kind of what's the longer term vision for this property? What's your strategy going forward?
We've been able to increase the rents with the renovations that we've done. And so at that point, I think we would love to be able to turn it over to somebody who would see the greater potential. You always leave things that can be done for whoever wants to take it over next. But since we've done a lot of learning over these last 6 months and the value has increased because of that, then I think we do want to go on to something much larger and being able to turn it over to a third-party manager that we would be also know what needs to be done? What would we expect of a third-party manager just because of what we've already learned through our own management experience?
So during a typical week, what are maybe one of the 2 or 3 things that you guys do in a typical week that supports the property itself? I mean, do you guys do your books on the property? Do you talk to some of the vendors on the property that support the property? What active things do you guys do, and how much time does that take? So I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, you're an active physician. How long does it take you to work in an 11-unit building?
I do the numbers, so I take care of all the rents, and people pay online. We're using Resman, and it's great. Heidi does kind of the day-to-day with the tenants. We both do the rehab and really enjoy that.
But I'm mostly there if I'm needing to supervise the contractors that are coming in.
Yeah, you're the high-touch person that everybody knows that it's you. And sometimes they recognize Gary, that's married to Heidi, but some of the times they don't. But explain to me, what's Resman?
It's the software that we used for all the bookkeeping. There's an online platform where they can pay their rent. They are able to put in requests for maintenance. It's just been a good communication tool as well as software for managing the books.
And out of the 11 units that you guys have, how many are actually paying their rents online?
All but 2, I think.
That's great.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's better than knocking on doors and trying to figure out when the rent's going to be paid. If it's automatically just ACH from their account to your account, I mean that's a great way of keeping track of what's going on, and then especially the maintenance orders too. That comes say to an email to you, I would imagine, and that gives you the timestamps. It clocks it in exactly how much time to do it. How's the city been to work with? I mean, that's another thing that you guys own properties. What's it like to work with the city?
This particular city is actually very good to us. I mean, I feel comfortable, but I don't know any better maybe, since this is the only multifamily unit that we've owned, and it has been in there. And working with the inspectors, they've just been fine, great, no problems. As far as the court, that's been fine too. We see what they need.
And you may have said it, but maybe I didn't hear it. Where did you guys put some CapEx into the property? What needed to be done?
We got $3,000 a door when we got the loan. Mm-hmm. We've been doing the rehab, probably about maybe $4,500 a door. That's been basically the CapEx.
And where's it going to?
Just interior rehab. We've done floors, definitely painted, put often new appliances, even washers and dryers in. Mm-hmm. People really like the washer and dryer.
Was it already pre-wired and pre-set up for washers and dryers?
There were connections, which is unusual actually. But because it had connections, we figured, well, let's go ahead and try this and see how that affects rents. And people jumped on it for a much
Do you have
rent.
them bring in their own machines, or do you provide them machines?
Initially, we put machines in. There have been others who have been looking for a place with connections. So we've allowed them to put their own. But then, of course, there's things in the lease that stipulate certain things. And I think that has been part of the draw. And the fact that it's a townhouse. Yeah. So there aren't neighbors upstairs jumping up unless it's their own children.
Sure. Okay. Talk a little bit about the loan. How was that structured, Ricardo?
Yeah, it was a bridge loan with a local lender. We were able to get you 75% leverage.
Yes.
And that included the rehab, a good portion of the rehab, right? So it was $3,000 per unit. Now, are you going to upgrade every unit?
Yes, we're planning to do that. We have people that didn't move out, though, and
they want to stay.
The rent bumped
so they're
from
willing to.
Yeah, $800 to $900. One was $950. So
without even any rehab.
Outstanding. So it was a bridge product, 5-year fixed term. It was in the low 4s. Is that right?
4.0.
4.0.
Yeah.
For a 5-year fixed, 25-year amortization. Right. It was full recourse.
Yes.
So that's one of the things maybe we can talk about is you jumped in pretty quick on your first deal, signing full recourse. I guess that's another piece of the deal that you had to get comfortable with. Any concerns there kind of going in?
No.
No. You felt good.
I felt good. There was no worries. I mean, the property looked solid, and the amount of money was not a big deal.
And when things don't go exactly the way you want, you figure you pay for education typically. That's all part of it, or this is all part of it.
Great outlook. Yeah. So going forward, what's next? So this is 6 months in. It's pretty stabilized. I know you guys are already looking. Tell us a little bit about what that second property, what does that potentially look like? What are you looking for?
Well, I'd like to retire Heidi now. So we want third-party management, of course. It would be nice to be 100-plus units, but we look at anything really. With this value-add component has been just something that we see as great potential. It seems kind of hard to find a great value add, but something stable where we can get non-recourse and yet have a fair value add component. That's what really would be ideal.
But then, of course, in that kind of situation, you still get to play with the elements and exercise creativity.
Keep it exciting, right?
Yes.
So do you envision syndicating this next transaction or doing it on your own?
Yeah, syndicating. I think that would,
Yes.
great to have a team. And it's a little scary. It would have been scary to do that starting out. I think we feel a lot more comfortable now.
So talk about that level of confidence, because we work with a lot of first-time investors, and those that do syndicate right up front, that's always a concern. Hey, I'm dealing with other people's money, and that's always a lot scarier than just doing it on your own. So how's this giving you confidence? Starting with a smaller deal, now you can go to these potential investors, tell your story. You've got the experience. Talk a little bit about that.
I think we know how to underwrite now. When we started, we really didn't know what it would take to do a decent rehab, whether to put granite in or not, whether to put vinyl plank, and how much it would cost. So I think we could do a much better job of underwriting now that we know what we're doing. So I would not have done this with other people's money the first time out. I really didn't know enough. Of course, maybe after a year or 5 years being in other people's deals, maybe I'd know that, but we certainly didn't know it at 2 months.
At least you'd have to have people with whom you could trust, or that they felt that they could trust you throughout this learning experience.
Yeah, for sure.
And the first turn was the most difficult. When that first unit had to turn, we had to figure it all out as to how much to put in. We had bids that went from $3,000 to $18,000. It's like, okay, where do we fall in this? What are we supposed to actually be doing in this particular unit, the very first one?
Yeah, you have a lot of choices when you have money that you want to put out there to invest, whether it is buying single families or even like we talked about, a franchise. If you wanted to buy a Popeyes franchise or something like a triple net deal. Are you happy that you made the decision to get into multifamily, something that you can control?
No doubt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't imagine not doing this. This has been just a blast to do. And also, when we had lost we went down through this financial crisis, the hope that we have of recovering from that with multifamily it's just exciting. It makes a big difference.
That's great.
We've got a lot of aspiring investors that listen to the podcast. Any pieces of advice in terms of how to get started, how to get that first deal? Because that's, as Paul mentioned at the beginning, that's always the toughest. How do you make that leap? Any advice for our listeners?
I think you have to make sure your team is in place. And for us, it's Heidi's my team. And one of the things we wouldn't have done is jump into this if we had any conflict over this. But once we had worked that out, we actually got closer as husband and wife just because of doing this together. And the other thing I think is I would, as soon as I'm ready, I'm glad I jumped in. You don't know what you don't know until you find out. In medicine, we as you do your residency, we have the saying, see one, do one, teach one. If you're doing a lumbar puncture, you watch one and then you do one, And this is what that's how I've always learned. And so I have to do something hands-on. I'm not going to sit back and just watch. I don't learn that way.
Yeah, you can't move forward if you just keep watching, You actually have to jump in and apply what you're learning. The things that you're hearing about, you need to apply and do.
Some great advice. And, I really like the story that you guys tell, especially talking a little bit about your passion for medicine, now your passion for multifamily, and then working together as a partnership.
Sure is.
We have partners that we have other investors, Mr. X, Mrs. Y is partners, but having a husband and wife come together as a team and what I'm hearing is strengthening their relationship, working on something is very great towards working together and being successful, where, sometimes people do not engage their spouse into this business. I am a big believer in bringing your spouse into this business and having them understand of what's going on a day-to-day basis. And blessed that Heidi is able to take control and manage your asset. I can't wait to see what the 100 units plus is going to look like in the future. So great podcast today. Anything coming up, Ricardo, in Old Capital world?
Yeah, so we've got a number of events, but one large event coming up in October
the 5th, and we'll probably announce that next week. And so we're excited about that one. Make sure you save that date on your calendar, October 5th, under the Old Capital Conference at Edison Convention Center. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then if you guys want to find out any information concerning structuring multifamily financing, go into the oldcapitalpodcast.com website, oldcapitalpodcast.com, and ask for the 15-page white paper report on financing, multifamily financing 101. I think you'll find that to be very interesting, and please sign up for that. So, Gary, Heidi, guys, thanks for coming in. We do appreciate it. It's an inspiring story. I love it. And we look forward to seeing you on your deal number 2, 3, 4, and 5 to come back to the podcast. We appreciate it. Ricardo Hinojosa, thanks for sitting in with us. Gary, Heidi, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you
so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.